the history of sprint car racing is amazing. It goes back, and I know we're Wing Nation and talk a lot about wing sprint car racing, but before Winged Nation, it was non-wing sprint car racing from border to border and coast to coast. And one of the hotbeds was in California, and one of the hotbeds in California was the famed Calistoga Speedway, which continues on and actually this week honors one of the Hall of Famers, Louis Vermeil, with the Louis Vermeil Classic. Joining us on the program is the son of Louis Vermeil, guy who I believe grew up at Calistoga Speedway, loving sprint car racing, and went on and had considerable success in the NFL, including a Super Bowl win back in 2000 with the St. Louis Rams. Coach Dick Vermeil joins us on the program. Hello, Coach. Welcome to Wing Nation.
Excuse me, I lost you there a minute. My cell phone cut out. I got you.
Well, welcome to Wing Nation. We're glad you joined us here on the program.
Oh, hey, great to be there. I have a history in that Wing Nation, so I'm excited about this coming weekend.
Well, and no doubt about it, and we want to talk a little bit about what's going on at Calistoga, but Coach, tell us about your father. We know he's enshrined at the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame, but tell us about the great Louis Vermeil.
Well, he grew up in Northern California, San Mateo area originally, and his grandfather owned a place in the Napa Valley, was in the wine business and everything. And my dad spent a lot of time up there in the summertime and that kind of stuff with him. And he gradually, after high school, just went up there and worked in the Ford garage, and then opened his own shop behind the house in Calistoga. And he worked there until he passed on. But he developed an interest in sprint car racing, I'd say in the early 30s, okay, and was very much involved as a fan. And as he matured as a mechanic and everything, he got more and more involved in sprint car racing through a good friend in San Francisco named Grant Douglas. And my dad bought Grant Douglas's old number 10 at that time sprint car that was built in 1926 by a Bugatti brother. George Bugatti, the famous Indy mechanic. Mm-hmm. His brother built it about 1926, and my dad got that thing, and then he actually didn't run it because of the Second World War, and they started running it after the war. And I remember that phase real well because that's, of course, I was old enough to really remember it today and enjoy it then. In fact, I restored the old number 7 Miller Schofield 4-banger, and it will one day be a gift to the the Sprint Car Hall of Fame in Knoxville, Iowa.
I mean, just sitting here listening to you and talk about this side of the sport that we really don't get to hear enough about, Steve. I mean, we hear a lot about the current day sprint car racing. So to hear this, Coach, is just phenomenal. What are your memories of being around the race shop or around the racetrack with your dad?
Well, first around the race car, my dad worked all day, and then all night they'd work on the sprint car. And at that time, I was a young kid in my early teens, and I would have the job like hand grooving the rear the rear tires, when they'd have them recapped and then groove what they wanted into them with an iron. That would be one of my jobs, hold wrenches and hold lights, and as they worked on it. And then I remember them firing it up in the street out in front of the house at midnight. Here's this awesome 4-cylinder Miller Schofield Model A going up and down the street with no muffler. It shook up the neighborhood, believe me. And then seeing it run on the old Calistoga racetrack. And, in fact, that car won the championship as a car in 1950 with Jack Patsitaw driving it. So it never won a race, but he finished every one. So the consistency was a main factor. Now I have the car, and I've run it in exhibitions, and it hasn't finished more than 5 laps. So my dad, I think, is really mad at me.
Oh yeah, he's tampering with you, that's for sure. Dick, tell us about the Owl Garage. This sounds like a fascinating place.
Well, it was an old barn,
yeah.
And my dad's good friends named it the Owl Garage because he worked all night. When you're making a living supporting your family with your hands, you got to work. And so that's what he did. And he also had 3A and national automobile towing services. So he was up a lot at nighttime. So they just called it the Owl Garage, and it stuck. In fact, I have the Owl Garage sign here in my ranch in Pennsylvania hanging over my garage door.
Wow. That's just so amazing. That really is. Want to talk a little bit more about that. Want to see what your mom's role in all of this was as well. And then, of course, talk about this weekend. So everyone hang in there. More with Coach Dick Vermeil in just a moment. Welcome back to Wing Nation here on MAV TV. I think Kendra and I are just sitting here with our minds racing on what it used to be like, what it was. Dick Vermeil is NFL football coach, so much success, 4-time NFL Coach of the Year, college football head coach, won the Rose Bowl, won the Super Bowl 34. Just an amazing career in football, but grew up at the racetrack, grew up at the sprint car track outside of Calistoga Speedway and the Owl Garage. Now, Coach, you were telling us about the Owl Garage and working all night long. Now, I understand that your mom as well, Alice, she'd occasionally have to whip up some fixings or some food for everyone there, right?
Oh, my God. Yeah, she would. She was an amazing lady, but she would feed everybody, especially race weekends that came. They would work on their cars, especially on a double race, 2-night racing. They would work on the cars all day in between races, and my mom would feed them. And then once a year, she'd put on a party. She'd cook it all herself. A couple neighbors would help her. For 150, 160 people, all in the racing association, drivers, car owners, officials, and they would party. And, of course, in the Napa Valley, you drink red wine. So they, my mom was deeply involved in that. And race day, she sort of ran the grandstand with the ushers and all that kind of stuff. It kept her involved in my dad's second career, that is running the races, which was originally ARA, and then it became NARC.
When you grew up and got into football and you started coaching, were you still involved in sprint car racing at all? And did you try to introduce some of the football side of your life to the racing side?
Just as a fan, when I was coaching in high school, my brother would run the midget. He was driving his midget at that time. He went into that field, and we would bring the midget to the auto shop at Hillsdale High School and run it in the parking lot. It would draw a large crowd of kids, believe me. But I would go to races, and especially over to Sacramento when they used to run the champ cars over there with all the great drivers, Freddie Agabation, Johnny Parson, Walt Faulkner, just Troy Ruttman, Billy Book, all those guys over there driving the big champ cars on the 1 mile dirt. So I didn't miss that very often. But the football really took over pretty quick, and I just became a good fan.
Well, I mean, it's amazing. And you mentioned the restored car along the way. This weekend, Calistoga Speedway has the Louis Vermeil Classic. A bunch of racing going on with the midget cars and the non-wing sprint cars. Do you get a chance to follow along with what's going on at Calistoga? It sounds like to me there's a pretty good resurgence out there of the racetrack. What do you expect for this weekend, and what are you going to be watching along the way here?
Well, Tommy Hunt, who really is the promoter and runs the event, and an old racing name you would all recognize. Yep. He does a great job, and now he runs all the races that go on at Calistoga. But he's the guy that really brought the Louis Vermeil Classic back to Calistoga, and it's an exciting time for me. I fly out there to be there and try to get involved in. It's not like it used to be. They're a hell of a lot faster. I can remember when a car turned that track in 26 seconds might be on the pole in the trophy desk. But today they're turning 18 seconds, But I think it's the best form of pure racing there is on the half-mile dirt track, non-wing. These guys absolutely fly. And the midgets there, and the midgets are actually a little too small, I think, for that. But when they get on their head off in there, but they really fly as well. It's a very, very 2-night exciting sprint car racing. And the old racetrack, some people in Calistoga have dumped a lot of money into the track. A couple of very successful ventures have put a lot of money in the track, and it's really made a difference. I think it's about as good a half-mile dirt track left in the country as there is.
If your dad was still with us and could go to the track this weekend, what do you think he'd say about the way racing's progressed since he started the Owl Garage?
Well, his number one motto was he in the pits down there with his black and white striped shirt is he would tell the drivers to drive with their head, not their foot. I heard him say that a number of times. And I can give you a couple of names that he no longer would allow to drive because he thought he was going to kill themselves along with somebody else. Okay, because he was in charge, he wouldn't let them run because they were so dangerous on the track, not only for their own lives, the people around them. In the old days, that racing was very, very dangerous. They had no roll bars. And they had a seatbelt, yes, but I've seen in the early days some very tragic accidents on that track. It's dusty, dirty, rocks flying, but today the track is it's a beautiful track. They have great clay surface on it. It's got a nice bank. It's long straightaways, narrow turns, so the competition is really, really intense.
Man, it is going to be exciting, that's for sure. Coach, we appreciate you spending some time. Of course, Louis Vermeil, a 1995 inductee into the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame. So, folks, you can go on the Hall of Fame site, and when you go to Knoxville, you need to check it out and learn more about the great Louis Vermeil. Coach, we appreciate you taking some time and sharing your father's legacy with us and just sharing part of your story. Really, really interesting stuff. We enjoyed it very much. Thanks for the time.
Well, thank you. I'll tell you a little secret. My mother and father's ashes are in the pits there at racetrack. That's how much they love the place. Okay.
Oh, that is great.
That's fantastic. Thanks for the time, Coach.
Take care.
Wow. Kendra, how about that? Isn't that exciting?
I think that just gave me goosebumps because that's when you know their heart and soul was into that speedway and into sprint car racing.
Wow. Fantastic.
It's just another one of those stories we talk about with the Sprint Car Hall of Fame that the history of the sport is so rich if you just go and read about it.
Sometimes you even find a Super Bowl winning NFL coach that's part of it. Really, really cool. We appreciate Coach Dick Vermeil joining us. We need to step away. When we come back, our Tweet Your Seat Tweet of the Week, Kendra's T-shirt, and a whole lot more. Oh, speaking of Hall of Famers, we've got Doug Wolfgang Unplugged coming up next.